Good afternoon. I'm going to take this off because it's going to drive you all nuts as it whacks on here. Nina Mani. Thank you to those who responded. To those who didn't, you may not know the response. So Nina Mani is a Ghana greeting, and it's essentially saying, are you well? Have you been well fed? Are your needs met? But we often use it simply as a greeting. So when you're saying Mani ai, you're saying, yeah, tummy's full, thanks. So, Nina Mani? Thank you. I love to use, I'm still learning, I have much to learn, but when we use language like that, it is a way of us being able to join and to live out our covenant with First Peoples. So, my name, as you heard, is Reverend Linda Driver. I am in placement at Brougham Place, Uniting Church. I'm also a member of the Assembly Standing Committee. Kerry is also, is anyone else here who's on Standing Committee that I have missed? No, so Kerry and I are. I'm also a member of the Act 2 Steering Committee, which is why I am speaking today, and Paul goes as well, but you've heard from Paul in his apology this afternoon. Our role on the steering committee is really to be part of that committee, to be a reference team to the project unit who are doing really the work, the lion's share of the work. And we gather once a month, we listen to where they're going, we look at the risks, we look at the way the project is tracking, we provide feedback and encouragement. So I want to say from the outset, if you have questions, I will try to answer them, but actually it's the project team who are on the ground every day working through this who know a lot of the answers. So it could be that I take your questions on board and get back to you with that. So what I want to do is I do not want to assume that you all know what Act 2 is. I'm imagining in this room that we have people with a whole range of understanding, some who may have heard the words Act 2, have no idea what it is, and some who have fully engaged with it and are going to go, oh my gosh, Linda, get on with it. So I apologise to those people who are fully engaged with it because I really want to make sure we are all on the same page with Act 2. So on some of the seats here, and I apologise to those who are online, but on some of the seats here, I've put some posters. And the reason I put that there is because there's a QR code on there. Now, for those online, if you have, of course you've got internet access, that's why you're online. If you type in act2uca.com and it's on the screen, it'll take you to the website. And I think part of my role today is to empower you to know where to find these resources and how to engage. So I know you don't often get asked in a meeting, but take out your smartphone, surely you have one on you, or your device, and scan that QR code or look up Act 2 UCA. And if you are distracted as I'm talking, there, David's already done it. If you're distracted as I'm talking, as you work your way through the website, well, my job is done, all right? I'm very happy with that. But please see that as the collection point of all the materials to do with Act 2 that are available. It's an amazing website. And as I hear, has a lot in it. So I want to just help you a little bit with that. So this is an introduction, a little bit of an update on where we're up to, and then an invitation. So feel free to keep looking things up and clicking in different areas, but I am going to continue. Between now and the 17th Assembly in July 2024, the Act 2 project is seeking to engage the whole church in exploring and discerning about our future together. So, a couple of years ago, our last assembly, it was decided to begin this project. And so I'm just going to read from the minutes of that assembly meeting that in consideration of the report that went to that assembly and paragraph 17 of the Basis of Union, the Uniting Church acknowledges that the demand of the gospel, the response of the church to the gospel, and the discipline which it requires are partly expressed in the formulation of the church and its law. The aim of such law is to confess God's will for the life of the church. But since law is received by human beings and framed by them, it's always subject to revision in order that it may better serve the gospel. And so the Uniting Church will keep its law under constant review so that its life may increasingly be directed to the service of God and humanity, and its worship to a true and faithful setting forth of and response to the gospel of Christ. The law of the church will speak of the free obedience of the children of God and will look to the final reconciliation of humanity under God's sovereign grace. So Act 2 is looking at what is our law, if you like. How is it that we are church? And particular, we mentioned earlier, how do we govern ourselves so that we can better express, share the gospel? And so it's been given this task to look at. The Act 2 task is quite large, but it doesn't cover everything. It's not going to solve every issue, sadly, but it's quite contained. It is led, as I mentioned earlier briefly, by the National Act 2 Steering Committee and a staffed project unit established following that decision of the 16th Assembly. And the steering committee is made up of people from across the Uniting Church. So the four key areas, that we are focused on as Act 2, beginning with 1 being local communities of faith, shaping our church to strengthen the various forms of communities of faith and discipleship. 2 is our national identity, exploring our national identity shaped by the basis of union and our foundational commitments. Governance and resourcing, reviewing our governance structures, practices and resourcing to better reflect our contemporary context. And then theological culture and education, developing our theological culture and exploring a framework for theological education. And beneath that are 3 really important foundational principles in that we are informed by our covenant with the Uniting Aboriginal and Islander Christian Congress. We recognise that we are a multicultural church and we need to continue to fulfil all of our ethical, legal and social obligations. So we have been through a process of listening to the church. And so another document that you have, and you will be able to find this on the website, and I'm sorry I don't have the exact URL, and this is part of your challenge is to find these things, but it looks like this, all right? It looks like this. And so this is actually a plan of the time frame, the plan of how Act 2 is going to work, all right? I think the document, the title is not that helpful, but you will find it in there. Has anyone already found it? No? Anyway, so it's called Shaping the Future of Our Church. And what it does is it says that we've been through an exploration process, we're now in a discernment process, and then we get to recommendation. And so it breaks down how we're doing that across the whole breadth of the church across our nation. And so at the moment, we find ourselves in this collective discernment phase. So that's run from June until the end of November. So we're getting close to the end of that phase. When we get to the end of that phase, we then move into a time of developing recommendations for action. So all of the data that has been collected during this phase goes to the project team, who then brings some recommendations, if you like, to the steering committee. We have a retreat in January where we're going to look at all of that and work out what will we bring to the national church, to the assembly in July next year. So that will be the next task, is to distill it all down into something usable. And we already have a question. David, you don't have a microphone, so... Thank you. David has said if you're looking on the website, the plan that I talked about is called Our Project Plan. Thank you, David. That's helpful. Okay, so we've been through this exploration phase. We are now in this collective discernment phase. And what that means is now we have a big fat report, because we love reports, don't we? This report is really, really helpful. So I've got one copy because, I've already used up a few trees and just giving you a few of those different flyers around the place, but it is there to download. You should be able to find that very easily, the report to download. And it's in various formats there, so you can either download it as the entire thing, you can look at the executive summary, you can look at the plain language executive summary. It's all there, all right? So one of the first things that you're encouraged to do is to engage with the report. So this phase that we're in now is showing this report to all the councils of the church, okay? So it began in June so that the Uniting Church South Australia Synod could engage with it. We were the first to see the report, just because of timing, because all the other synods were later. In fact, some of them are happening or just happened just now. So some people have only just seen the report because they could go online, couldn't they? But they've just had the opportunity to be able to engage with it as a synod. So that's where we're at. So really we are in that phase of engaging with this report. So since the report came out, the only new material is responses to people's questions. So within that website, there's an FAQ section. I don't know if anyone can find the FAQ section. And that FAQ section, I could just stop now and you'd find all your answers there most likely, because it is very, very helpful. They've been collating common questions and putting them there, and with many links to other places to be able to find your answers. It's absolutely very helpful. Helped me in preparing what I'm doing at the moment. And so the whole idea is that we are being asked to engage, as I said, with this report. It contains a summary of what we have heard, all right? So, and then it goes on to a theological reflection on what we've heard, and then an introduction to the phase we're in now with a set of directions for that first work stream, which was about local communities of faith and discipleship, and then a set of 4 different options for work stream 3, which is about the governance and resourcing. So, what did we hear? And I'm reading from something that you may have already read in one of the press releases that went out through the Assembly e-news. And in June 2023, the Assembly's Act 2 projects released this major project. And we heard in this 65-page report 8 key insights. And I'm not going to go into great detail, but there is a passion to recenter disciple-making in the life of our communities and to grow people in the life-giving way of Jesus. Is that good news? Yes, that's fantastic. So there is a deep heart across our church for making and growing disciples. Hallelujah? Yes. We now have a more accurate picture of our church because we've had so much response. This has gone far, wide and deep into the church. We've engaged with over 2,000 congregations and communities, and the list goes on. This has gone far and wide. We have heard, and you've also heard it today, that many in our congregations are weary and overwhelmed. The number one challenge that many are saying that they are facing is a decline in capacity, age, people and energy, or a combination of those things. Our people are weary. And so we have this challenge ahead of us as a whole church to be able to look out for one another and look at how can we follow Christ as we move forward sharing the gospel. This weariness is not the whole story, but considering the central place of local communities at the heart of our church, it is deeply significant. We heard that our system is no longer working as designed. People across our church affirm the principles of our governance, our interconciliar model, our consensus decision-making, our equality in leadership, discerning the spirit and the involvement of the whole people of God, but most also believe the system itself is no longer working. We have seen so much change since the 46 years since union, both within the church and in the wider communities that we inhabit. And so we need to, as I said earlier, we need to review where we are at. We know that the challenges that we face are systemic and many are consistent across the life of the church. And so the scope of these challenges invites us to look at the whole picture because the way our church functions as the context is the context in which our local communities operate. We also learnt that there's something broken in our relationships. The body of Christ is a rich image for our life. It's interconnected, interdependent, each with a place and each understanding its role as part of the whole. And there are clear fractures in our body at this time. The bonds that tie our different councils and different parts of our body together have become fragile. And we've heard about the gap between who we say we are and who we are. There is an environment of mistrust, of hurt, uncertainty, angst and frustration that's grown under the stresses and the strains of our challenges. And we struggle with the vision of commonwealth. We struggle with communication and collaboration, and we find ourselves siloed. So this report includes a lot of truth-telling. It also tells us that the shape of our church is changing. At the same time, our communities have been shrinking. Our community service agencies have grown into one of the largest networks of services in the country. We have around 1,672 local Uniting Church communities, and we now operate about the same number of service locations. There are other significant non-congregational expressions of the Uniting Church, like schools. So what questions, challenges and opportunities does that national picture pose for the future? There is much to celebrate. There is still much love for the Uniting Church and the life and identity we've nurtured for almost 5 decades. And these same markers of our national identity are consistently affirmed. The ongoing value of the basis of union, our covenant with Congress, our multicultural identity, equality in our leadership, our commitment to every member ministry, our commitment to justice, and our commitment to an informed faith. And so we continue to seek new ways to make and grow disciples and serve the world. And so just going back to what Trevor mentioned, we need imagination. In this case, we need a theological imagination. As we look to the future, theological reimagining will need to accompany, inform and inspire our work on structure and culture. And so this report then goes on to look at different ways that we can start addressing those things. So importantly, there's 2 things that have happened. First, we've released, and I've got another document called Comparing the Options. So this is about Workstream 3, Governance and Resourcing. So there is both a document that puts together on one double-sided page the 4 options that have just been thrown out there in a careful, prayerful way for people to consider as new ways of looking at the way we govern our church. The Act 2 team do not have a preferred option. We just heard different options and we thought, let's put it out there and let's start seeing if any of these will address the issues we face. So there's both this document that puts it together as a table, and then for those who like more visual, there's that sort of version as well. And you'll find those on the website as well. And so you've got 4 different options. We're reimagining what our governance looks like. We are sticking to the basis of union. We're not changing that. We're sticking to our interconciliary councils. But we intentionally use different names. And as you look at the different options, you'll think, oh, they mean synod there, or oh, they mean presbytery there, or whatever. But we've intentionally taken that away to start looking at what are the functions of those councils. And so our challenge is to look at this, to pray through this, and then think about our own context. In our own context, which of these models is going to be helpful to us? Which of these models is actually going to not make it any better at all? And that's what we are asking, is for that feedback so that we can learn which direction we need to be able to take as a whole church. And that's part of that discernment phase. The other thing that's been happening is that we put out a call for theological reflection. And so that's addressing Workstream 4. And I think it's nearly 40 papers have been written. Over 30 have now been uploaded on that page. And so there's this rich diversity of theological reflection, some wonderful papers there to read, and I really encourage you to engage with them. It'll take you a little while unless you're a very fast reader, but there's some wonderful papers there to be able to reflect on as well as we start looking at who are we theologically and what do we need to be able to think about. So 31 papers there at the moment. So the invitation to you is to join in, is to engage with this, is to work your way through the very dense website, but in particular to look at the report So, sorry about that. So to download the report, work your way through, have a look. Do you agree with the things that the team have come up with? Do you agree with their assumptions about who we are as a church? Because we can go right back to that and challenge that. But also then when it comes to some of those recommendations, how are they helpful in your context? Take this to your church council, take this to your house group, take it to whichever group that you connect with and have a conversation. And you have until the 30th of November to respond. And you can respond in a number of ways, all of which the information is provided on the website. And as I said, the FAQ page just sort of, in a way, it might even be a good starting point because it sort of summarises all the questions that people have. When I say starting point, after you've read the report, go to the FAQs because it's just fantastic. Now, I could keep going on and on and on, but it's afternoon, we've had lunch, we're all getting a bit sleepy. I really want to stop there because I think the most important thing I wanted to do today was to be able to show you how to find the information, to give you a general idea of what Act 2 is all about, and to encourage you to engage as individuals or as groups as much as you can. I can try to take questions if there's time, but I'm also happy to be available in our session at the end of the day if people want to engage with me.